Hi, I'm Steve Limins. I'm a policy manager at the British Beer and Pub Association. We're a leading trade body representing the UK's brewers and pubs. One of the many areas that we work on is environment and sustainability. This is a key issue at the moment and something that we do on behalf of our members to tell the story of the sector, but also to highlight and represent some of the challenges and opportunities. Joining me today for this discussion, I have Ellis Hall, who is Head of Carbon Partnerships at Future Net Zero, Andy Dyson, Director of Business Development at Revolution Bars, and then joining us virtually is Alex Legray, who is Director of the Lamb Gastropub in Berkhamsted. I think let's start with some introductions. Ellis, do you want to kick off?
I'm Ellis Hall, Head of Carbon Partnerships at Future Net Zero. We work with businesses across the UK to effectively set their sustainability strategies. So we will go into the company, help them measure their carbon and then implement different technologies or ideas or ways of working to allow them to reduce their carbon in line with the government net zero plans.
Thanks. Andy.
Yeah, so I'm Andy Dyson. Nice to meet you both. I'm Business Development Director at Revolution Bars Group. So we are a group of 69 bars around the country, and I lead the sustainability project within that. So we've set the ambition to be net zero by 2030, and we're 2 years into that plan now. So quite a lot of action has taken place the last 2 years.
Excellent. Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Legray from the Lamb Berkhamsted. We are a 300-year-old gastropub that has recently undergone a renovation. We do fine dining, craft beers and cocktails, and my background has been in marketing, but moreover, customer-facing hospitality for the last 16 years.
Thanks, Alex. So I think today we want to talk a little bit about some of the complexities in the landscape around energy performance certificates and government plans coming for EPC. I think we should broaden this to a certain extent as well, to talk a little bit about energy savings in a wider way. If we sort of start with a little bit of context, the new minimum standards for EPCs, the minimum E rating, is something that will be enforced from the 1st of April next year. But we know that the government has some pretty strong ambitions and is proposing some even more complex changes so that by 2027, premises will have to have an EPC rating of a C leading up to 2030. Where that energy performance certificate rating must be at the very least a B. Ellis, can you tell me how your organisation is working to help people come up against these ambitions?
Of course. So EPC is one element of what we do alongside the wider strategy setting. So EPCs are designed for commercial and residential buildings to ensure that they meet a certain level so that whoever's in that property can use their energy as efficiently as they can. And we know that businesses and homes, I guess UK buildings generally, are some of the worst in Europe for efficiency. So there's a lot of work that we need to do really to help homes and businesses. So what we usually do is we will head into the company, but we look at it across the board, so trying to look at their carbon and where they can improve their processes. And a lot of the stuff that we recommend is usually aligned to how businesses can also improve their EPCs. So there's typical things that businesses can do to improve their energy efficiency rating. And it can be things as simple, and they are all very simple and straightforward, like insulation. If you look at most commercial buildings, there won't be much roof or cavity wall insulation. Having controls within your building, so lighting and heating controls. And I'm talking about these things that people were talking about 5-10 years ago. LED lights. Everyone's heard of LED lights, and most people have made their switch. But these simple things are things that really can bump up your EPC. So making those simple recommendations. The challenges come with the financial side of things. Where do businesses get the funding to be able to do this? We know what's happened in the last couple of years, and there's just issue after issue that's putting a lot of pressure, especially on the hospitality industry. So then finding the funding for this is often really difficult, and typically when you want to go to the government for it, that then feeds down into your local councils. And different councils have got different things. They've all got access to pretty much the same money, but they just use it in different ways. So it can be really challenging for them. So what we do is understand where they're located, see what opportunities are for them, and just really try to put a bit of a longer term plan in place and not make them realise that they need to do this straight away.
Can I just ask, I mean, you mentioned some practical tips there, insulation, LED lights. You suggest that these are things that people have already done. So to a certain extent, what is if you've already done these things, what is the next step? What are some of the things that people should be prioritising to sort of further improve that efficiency journey?
I think that understanding your existing position is really key, because you could have done all these things and it might have bumped you up to, let's say it has bumped you up to an E, and you're there ready to go for the next couple of years, but you do want to get ahead of the curve. The best thing to do is, I would say, is get an assessor in, someone that is a registered EPC assessor, and work with them and talk to them about what can be done, understand the different things that they would also recommend, because they might recommend specific things to your building, and they might then recommend actually investing in some on-site generation through renewable technology, and whether that is solar or getting an air source or ground source heat pump. Addressing these things are generally quite specific to the site as much as they are generalised, but if you can get an assessor into your building to understand where you're at today and then understand what they would recommend you do, I think that's often key. And EPCs are generally quite cheap, even for a commercial property. You know, a couple of £100, it's not too much of an investment, especially when we know that we're going to need to be there legally in the next few years.
Andy, Revolution Bars, I think it's 69 venues, 3,000 odd staff. How are you approaching this as a subject at the moment?
I think EPC individually should be a bit of a concern for everybody, because, you know, as Ellie said, there's a lot of pubs in the UK that are really old and drafty and et cetera, et cetera. I guess on one hand we feel slightly lucky in the fact that, you know, we don't have a lot of those very old buildings, and we also have buildings on probably typically longer leases than maybe the average tenanted pub. Yeah. So when we're looking at kind of paybacks for different things, we're looking over a much longer time frame. That said, it really is a landlord responsibility, but we are beginning to see landlords try and, through re-signing leases, push that responsibility onto us to actually not just maintain their premises while we occupy it, but also to improve the premises. So EPC on its own feels like quite a worry, but I guess my advice, or certainly the way we're approaching it, is not to take the EPC element of it in isolation, and that really the way to look at this is on a sustainability strategy side. There will be costs within there's costs within our sustainability strategy, but there's also efficiencies within there. So quite often when you can save carbon, you can save cost as well. And we work really hard to try and finance our strategy through savings that we make along the way. So, energy efficiency, some of that comes down to kit that you need to buy that's more energy efficient, but some of it is just discipline within the site and making sure that lights are switched off at night and air conditioning units. And we've seen some really impressive savings over the last 3 or 4 years by really engaging with the frontline teams, and those guys see things that we don't see from a day-to-day basis, and when we engage with them, there's some really significant improvements we've made. So something like 20% reduction in our energy bill over the last 4 years, and that's just from getting people engaged with turning kitchen equipment off in the afternoons, turning lights off when you close, turning the air conditioning off when the guests leave, so some really easy stuff. But then that money we save obviously then has to be reinvested into some of the elements that do cost money, so electrifying kitchens or whatever, So I think you've got to look at it on a much wider sense than just focusing in on what is the EPC going to cost me.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not just those kind of immediate practical measures that you can take. It's actually addressing behaviour as well, which is, in some respects, I think probably quite a nice broader approach at this point, as you say, not just to EPC, but from a sort of broader sustainability point of view. I just want to go back to that point about cost, because obviously, cost is one of the things that people will focus on here. Do you find that there is access to support, financial support for investment in some of these things, or is it literally just payback from that work itself?
Typically, you have to go to the council. So rather than it being broad brush across the whole of the UK, it's dependent on where you're located. I know that Coventry Council were doing a lot of work. They had a full programme and they were one of the only ones across the country. So if you've got any places located in Coventry, I would speak to them, because they were doing a really, really great programme for commercial businesses. Obviously, there's a lot of hoops to get through when it comes to applying for funding. So it can be quite a challenge to get to the end, but it's definitely worth it. And if you do speak to suppliers, there are a lot of larger companies out there that are delivering these technologies, and they will do no capex. So usually what would happen is they would front that cost for you, and you would pay them back through the savings that they would be getting you, or you'd be paying a slightly increased price compared to what it would be if you'd have invested in the technology yourself. So for example, if you'd put solar on your roof, you might pay 22p or 24p to the people that have funded it for you. So they're making their money back on top of that over a really long period. And the things with that is you have to have a long-term 20-year ambition with these things. Like you mentioned, you've got longer leases, so you've got the ability to do that. The challenge comes when you've got shorter leases, because a lot of these technologies don't have that return on investment in 2 to 5 years.
You mentioned technology, and Andy, I think you commented on kitchens. Cellars, obviously, the other big one with pubs. What sort of technologies in cellars have you come across that can help with some of this energy efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, we are working with Heineken on the SmartDispense system. So we've got one site on trial at present, and we're about to launch with another 5. I think we're pretty convinced on the energy efficiency side that is working for us. What we've not quite got to is the overall, because there's obviously water savings and other costs that are attached to it. We have done some other trials with other cellar equipment, and that we're convinced is just about the best payback of everything we've looked at. So ahead of electrifying kitchens, and we're kind of prioritising this list in terms of what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, particularly with the way that energy prices are going at present. And I think, just to build on that point a little bit, I think there's an opportunity that already exists, but I think there needs to be a wider opportunity in collaboration, because there's, within this sector, within sustainability, there's not a huge amount of competitive advantage from one business to the next. So, and I know there's yourselves, the BBPA, there's a Zero Carbon Forum, UK Hospitality, and there's some collaboration already starting within that. But I think there is a real opportunity for, we're able to commit some level of resource. Bigger businesses than us are able to commit even more resource to this, and I think we've got to get better at, sharing the success stories and allowing people, particularly at the single site or smaller group level, to be able to learn from some of the experiences of the bigger guys.
Alex, and I think really an important story here, because the Lamb is about 300 years old, I think. So very much an example of perhaps one of the more challenging sort of venues, but as Alice has noted, a particular issue that we see in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm a tenant of one of those old English drafty pubs, a good 300-year-old staple on the town high street, firm favourite with many, many generations. And we do face that troublesome juxtaposition of trying to be traditional and old and give that warm, cosy feeling, but also have energy leaking out many, many corners. We did undergo a renovation in 2019, complete renovation. A lot of modern practices were put in place. We do have SmartDispense by Heineken. However, it's in a very old cellar. So we have, for example, spent a lot of time, not too much money. We tried to be resourceful with how we spent our money, but trying to insulate and seal the cellar more to keep that energy in, the energy that does get cooled, to keep that cellar nice and cold. But we have been really creative with the way that we have operated, and we have been adaptive and flexible to try and find ways to save energy. I'd say, like, sometimes you say counting the pennies don't really help the pound, but in our case, we had to, because you have to start there and work your way up. So we have sensors for lights, and we have LED ones, which state the obvious, but not everyone has done that move over yet. But they're all LED, and they're also on sensors. So give it 5 minutes when no one's there, that hallway's off, or that, you know, staff operating area is off, and that was really important to us. A few little hacks that my business partner came up with, just ones that didn't cost money, but it was more of a behavioural thing, like you mentioned earlier, really have made the difference. But we have learned a lot during the journey of being a tenant of such an old pub, and found really resourceful ways to save energy on a local level, on a sort of an operator level. That would be interesting to feed back to you guys one day.
What can you tell us about some of the particular challenges that you've faced and how you've addressed them?
The store where we have our ice machines pumps out a lot of energy. So we've tried to redivert the hot energy into the building and pull in without using much, without having the fan on. So there's a fan that just runs off the convectional air to pull it through and just put it into the building to try and build the mass up. Being an old pub, the fireplace is quite prominent and people really enjoy that. So we, instead of buying logs, which down in the CO2 emissions in the whole general scheme of the world is not great for it, we're using repurposed sawdust compressed logs, which are totally waste products. And then for the most of the winter, that fuels all heating of the whole one side of the pub without having to have the radiators on. Which the radiators, obviously, we moved over to Hive so we can monitor our temperature remotely. All those little technology tweaks which we can do from home to be a more modern pub, even though we're in the setting of a very old building, have really helped us step forward a bit.
I think, though, adding on to what Andy and Alex have both said, a lot of the stuff is behavioural that impacts the business, and I think this can be addressed from someone having one pub or someone having multiple. But I think some of the really important things with sustainability and becoming more efficient is making sure that everybody at all levels, or somebody at all levels, is involved. If you don't have different people from within the business looking at this, you often only get one perspective, so you only get one role. And I know, Andy, you mentioned you're not in all the pubs all the time, so you don't see the little quirky things that people that are serving drinks can see. So it makes it really difficult. But you also need to make sure that you've got buy-in from the very top level. Because if you are busy and then you're not thinking about it, the first thing that gets dropped is often the thing that the top management aren't bought into. So it's ensuring that you've got multiple perspectives from different departments, but also going up and down the organisation. And I think it's really crucial to get everybody bought in to make sure that everyone's aligned.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point.
And I was going to say something really similar. I think the engagement bit is the key bit. There's a lot of efficiencies and waste that go on that a lot of us don't know about, and you're having eyes and ears on that. But also that, you know, our staff members, generally a younger generation, and they really get all this stuff and they really care. And, you know, most of the ideas and the things that we've done over the last couple of years, you know, taking the passion fruit out of the Porn Star Martini, which is our top selling cocktail within Revolution Bars Group, so around 1.2 million of the cocktails a year. We made the decision to take the passion fruit out of the martini. We used to put half a passion fruit within it. It was a garnish that just gets in the way of people's drinks, and it was also a garnish that we realised had quite a big carbon footprint attached to it. So passion fruits generally come from South America. We realised there was 35 tonnes of these things coming over by plane each year, and it felt like the right thing to do in terms of trying to take some waste out of what we do. And not only did it save the carbon, it also saved quite a chunk of cost for us, which we've been able to reinvest into other energy saving initiatives across the business. But all that kind of stuff has all come from the frontline team. So, you know, you can try and do this yourself, and you'll have a certain range of ideas, and you'll probably get fixated on, it's going to cost me a lot of money and this piece of kit and that piece of kit. But actually, there's so much you can do, just taking some of the waste out of the system.
I think Alex mentioned a lot of the benefits as well. This isn't just about saving costs, and depending on which angle that you actually look at it, it can add so much value. And although it can't be used as a competitive advantage now, really, because we've gone from it being like a carrot motto to like a stick that your consumers are making you want to do this, but it will bring in better business because consumers, as challenging it is in the current environment, they want to buy from companies that are doing the right thing. And they want to go to these places where they know that the people care as much about the sustainability as they do as pulling a pint or making a really good Sunday roast. So I think it adds a lot of value in other areas, not just from cutting costs or getting your EPC rating up.
Alex, any final thoughts from you too?
Yes, I try to inspire the younger generation that work for me to do hospitality the way that I would want it to be done for the rest of the years to come. And these behavioral things and this mindset is what we're talking about. If I show them how to be resourceful with every bit of energy and how to approach things in a logical way, then future generations will act better and better and better, and we will improve as a group because soon we will not be working in the industry and they will be in our place, and it carries on, of course. But you've got to lead by example.
Alex, Ellis, Andy, thank you very much indeed for your time. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.